guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 13 is here, and I've got a wide receiver rankings list for you to help with all of your start-sit questions for Week 13 of fantasy football. The playoffs are fast approaching for fantasy. You have like 2 more weeks, this week and Week 14, before you jump into your playoffs, and I hope that you have all the chances in the world to get your teams there. If you're just on the cusp, I'm going to try and help you with these rankings, my wide receiver ones and wide receiver twos. The running back and quarterback videos are already posted here on the page if you wanted to go check those out as well. So if you have like a 3 out of 4, hey, I've got these 4 guys, which 3 should I play? Play the 3 that I have ranked higher on the list. Appreciate you guys being here. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell, and let's go.
He's a legend.
Aside from like where I might have the top 4 ranked this week, you're starting all of them if you have them. We only have a couple of teams on bye, the Cardinals and the Panthers, and aside from DeAndre Hopkins, there really isn't much that's on those teams in terms of guys who would be in the top 12. DJ Moore with Sam Darnold would have been in the top 24 if he had played, because, you know, he's much better at garnering targets. Darnold just seems to look his way, but they're off the slate. So the top 4 are pretty academic. At number 1, I have Stephon Diggs. Some of these guys are a little bit lower than normal this week because of the matchup. Diggs has a Thursday night matchup against New England, who does not allow teams to run the ball, but it's not like the Bills really try to establish it anyway. He comes out at number 1. Devontae Adams is in at number 2. The possible injury situation to Josh Jacobs might mean more targets heading Devontae Adams' way. It's not like he has done a poor job of earning targets the last month anyway, with 11, 13, 14, and 17 targets each of the last 4 weeks, with no less than 7 catches in any of those games. Behind Devontae Adams is Tyreek Hill. Now, Hill is a little bit lower this week than he would normally be. Again, it's like 3, so how low is he? In all honesty, because of the matchup against San Francisco, he can blow up at any given time. He can, he can blow up because of a 60 or an 80-yard touchdown catch. They've used him a lot more on short and intermediate routes. He has had that big playability, but has only scored 4 touchdowns on the year. The offense that they're running is very beneficial to him in terms of having like the most catches he's ever had, the most yards he's ever had, but not challenging for anywhere near his highest touchdown output on a season. And the matchup against San Francisco is just one that you typically would want to avoid, but I don't normally avoid anything with the top wide receivers in the league. They tend to be matchup independent. Justin Jefferson along the same lines, bad matchup, normally would be like my number 1 or number 2 wide receiver, but the Jets are very good defensively, and they have 2 extremely good cornerbacks that can mute production. He is still going to get service. 11 targets last week against New England, 5 targets against Dallas in a game that they got housed. So you can kind of take those games off the list. It's like, yeah, we see that is the possible floor, but that was completely extenuating circumstances. Just a horrible offensive situation for them collectively as a team. They laid an egg. The 2 weeks prior to that against Buffalo and Washington, 16 targets, 13 targets, and in 3 of those 4 games, 32 fantasy points, 38 fantasy points, and 28.5 fantasy points. So if he has a bad day for him, he does average 24.2 PPR points on the season. He might have like 19, which is why I have him ranked here at 4. And then we get kind of to the rest of the list. At 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God, has done exactly what we thought he would do post-trade of TJ Hawkinson. He is going to have that spectacular run-in, at least on volume, right? In a competent offense, the Lions have been fine. They're not thrilling. Jared Goff is doing what Jared Goff is supposed to do, which is basically get the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown as much as possible. 10 targets, 8 targets, 11 targets, 9 targets, 10 targets in the last 5 games. He is going to have another one of those run-ins where he has like 7 or more catches expected. Like if there's an over-under at 6.5 or 7 catches for Amon-Ra St. Brown any week, I'm probably going to take the over, because I would think that he's going to get 7 or more catches every single week. If you look at his last 5 games, 9 receptions against Buffalo, 7 against the Giants, 10 against Chicago, only 4 against Green Bay, but 7 once again against Miami in week 8. This is just where he's going to live. He is a PPR monster, and hopefully you spent that draft pick to go get him, because he is more than paid off on his draft equity all season long. CeeDee Lamb comes in here this week at number 6. A massive amount of targets, 31 targets the last 3 games. 10 targets a game is more than enough for me. The only time he had less than the double digits was in that 3-week span was against Minnesota. Again, that game on the other side where they won 40-3, and they're just not going to throw the ball. He did catch all 5 of the targets that were headed his way that week, though. So CeeDee Lamb is having a fantastic season and should continue to do so. At number 7, AJ Brown. Now, I could move AJ Brown down this list, and I've got him hanging on at 7 just because of the touchdown upside based on a couple of things. 1, he's very, very good. 2, he's on an offense that's scoring the third or fourth most points per game in the league. However, they do revolve around their running game a lot. That being said, Tennessee is a pass funnel. They don't let you run the ball as often or as efficiently as you would want to, which should mean more service to the wide receivers, even though since the Goddard injury, more service has gone towards Devontae Smith because AJ Brown has been effectively double teamed all the time, and they're just defensive coordinators are guiding the ball, dictating that it go somewhere other than AJ Brown. But you can't continually do that, and they're going to find ways to get the ball into his hands. 13.6 fantasy points last week, 10 the week before, 1.7 against Washington the last 3 weeks. He's averaging 16.6 on the season. Now, some of that is because of the 42.5 point output that he had against Pittsburgh. I'm not really expecting, that 3 touchdown, 150 plus yard game again. But I do think that he gets his way back to around his average between 15 and 20 points this week. T. Higgins behind him at number 8. I believe that Jamar Chase is on track to play this week, though I don't know that he's going to play a full complement of snaps. And in his absence, T. Higgins has done phenomenally. The last 2 weeks, 27 and 26.8 PPR points. If Chase comes back, defenses have to respect the fact that Jamar Chase is on the field, whether it's for 50% of the snaps and routes or whether he's going to run a full complement. We thought that Hollywood Brown was going to be on a snap count last week, and he clearly wasn't, playing 90+% of the snaps and leading that team, the Cardinals, in terms of their target market share on the week. So it's very possible that Chase just comes out here and is at full strength, but I don't believe that he is going to be. I can't make that bet. So I have T. Higgins here still as the number 1 target getter for Cincinnati this weekend, and I could be wrong. I have him at number 8. At number 9, Amari Cooper shoots up my rankings because fantastic matchup, even though it's on the road. I know every week we got to reference the home road splits, right? 11.5 fantasy points per game at home, 22 fantasy, twice as much basically when he plays on the road. But they do get Deshaun Watson back in this game. Kudos to Jacoby Brissett. He did a fantastic job this season at guiding this offense in a situation he knew he was going to be moved to the bench. He was more efficient than any of us gave him credit for being able to be in preseason. But now he gets one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league on talent, possibly one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league on talent. Quarterback is very deep right now in the NFL. So I hesitate to say anybody's top 5 because the top 5 is strong. And we haven't seen Deshaun Watson in a year and a half, 2 years now. He should still be great. And that's why I have Amari Cooper here. Amari's doing a much better job this year. He was on my do not draft lists before the season. He is averaging 17.2 PPR points per game. Clearly, I was wrong in that spot, not buying into the fact that Jacoby Brissett was going to be as good as he has been this year and thinking that they were going to be so super run heavy and slow that Cooper would not pay off. He has more than paid off in season long and in best ball, specifically in best ball because of those home road splits and the spike weeks that he's had. But Amari Cooper comes in here at number 9. At number 10, Jalen Waddle. I can't quit these Miami wide receivers. Even if they are in this tough matchup against San Francisco, they're still going to throw the football, and they're going to throw it a ton. That's just what they do. They may be a little less efficient. 10 targets last week, double-digit fantasy points, averaging 18.3 on the year. Double-digit fantasy points in his last 6 games? So really high floor. Always has that big ceiling, 6 touchdowns on the year, more than Tyreek Hill, but doesn't get the service that Tyreek Hill does in terms of target market share or catches. Hill has 31 more catches on the season than he does, and is very clearly the alpha in that situation. Keenan Allen comes in for me at number 11. Keenan Allen doing Keenan Allen things and has a matchup against Las Vegas this week, right? 15 targets in the 2 games since he came back from his injury, 13.4 PPR points and 15.9 PPR points in those 2 games. Has not had a monster game yet, has not had a 10+ target game yet. I believe that those are coming. His snap count increased, his route participation increased, and he is going to get back to doing what he does as Justin Herbert with a fuller complement of weapons around him, is getting back to his greatness. So as both of those things which complement one another continue, you're going to see Keenan Allen have bigger days and Justin Herbert have bigger days down the fantasy stretch. At number 12, Chris Godwin, who has been doing absolutely fantastic recently. And now we have a game where they play against New Orleans. If Lattimore comes back in this game, we know that you just kind of have to avoid Evans in games where Lattimore is on the field. We pay attention to wide receiver cornerback matchup, but typically speaking, those numbers are baked into the projections, right? Like you don't have to double count them. And in very wild situations like this one, I tend to put a little more credence on him. Evans has not been good. Lattimore seems to be his kryptonite. And that means that Chris Godwin, who has since coming back from injury, has had double-digit targets in every game but 2. He had 6 against Atlanta, where he still had 12.3 PPR points. He had 8 against Seattle, where he had 19. No game since coming back from injury in week 4 where he has had less than 10 fantasy points. 10.7 coming against the Rams in week 9. Last week, he exploded, catching 12 of 13 balls, hitting 110 yards and a touchdown. Touchdowns in 2 straight games. Chris Godwin rounds out my wide receiver ones on the week. Make sure that you join the Smiz Gang Listener League for Week 13 over on DraftKings. Go to smizzle.tv/links. It's the only way to find the link to the Listener League because it's not a lobby game. $10 center, 3 max, $35,000 in the player pool, and there is absolutely no rake. Reserve your seats today. You can go to rewards. You can click missions and then get less than 0 rake by doing a mission for each entry if you enter them 3 days in a row. And get your seats early because at 3,500 entrants, this one could fill a little bit early. So make sure you jump in there today. Go to the link tree, smizzle.tv/links, and join the league today. At number 13, this is where Jamar Chase is going to come in for me on spec this week. He is expected to return from his 4-game absence. I don't know which version of Jamar Chase we're going to get. I don't know if we're going to get a pitch count. I don't know if we're going to get a 50% Jamar Chase. I don't know if we're going to get the Hollywood Brown treatment where we get a full dose of Jamar Chase and he's full on ready to go at 100 miles an hour all the time. I would think that they're going to try and ease him back, but maybe they're not. In a game against Kansas City where this could have 70 real life points, as both offenses very, very good, and both defenses are like they can be scored on. So this could be one of the highest scoring games of the week. And if Jamar Chase, like I have him conservatively here at 13, if you have him, you're probably starting. You're not sitting Jamar Chase if he is back on the field, but you know that you're not 100% comfortable with it, which is kind of where I am. Typically, he'd be around like the wide receiver 3 through wide receiver 7 range, depending on the week and everybody else's matchups and his matchups. But this situation is different. Hopefully, he's back. One of my favorite players to watch in the league. Hopefully, that hip is doing well and he can continue to produce once he gets back on the field. Apparently, I screwed something up. Now I have to. At 14, DK Metcalf for... Like still, it's week 13 and I'm still surprised with how well this offense is doing in Seattle. Like the 3rd highest scoring offense in the league. Now look, DK Metcalf is not the DK Metcalf that he has been in previous years where he was the deep down threat, big bomber, averaging like 18 yards per reception. They've turned him into a short yardage possession receiver, which I guess is fine considering how large a human he is. But we're not getting those big splash plays anymore. What we are getting last week, 15 targets, 8.2 yards per reception. The week before, 9 targets, 11.8 yards per reception. The bad part is we're not getting those big splash plays to really pay off and win our games and win our weeks for us. But we're getting a really high floor play here. And you know that maybe one of those hook routes or slant routes or short catches that he gets can always, like he can break one tackle from a wee cornerback and just burst off and take it 60 yards to the house. Hopefully one of those things is coming because with 2 touchdowns in the last 6 games and 4 on the year, especially as high scoring as this team has been, 34 points against Las Vegas, he had no touchdowns. 31 points against Arizona, he had 1. 37 points against the Chargers week 7, he had no touchdowns. Like, hopefully he gets back to doing the thing that we all recognized him for doing before, but these touchdowns are going to other places as Pete Carroll is managing this team as best he can through the season with Geno Smith at quarterback, who has done an exceptional job. And DK Metcalf has now turned into, instead of being like middling floor, like not a low floor, but like a middle-ish floor for a wide receiver, super high ceiling guy, he's turned into like this really high floor. Maybe he can get a touchdown and give us a ceiling sort of guy. The transformation has been interesting, but possibly tough matchup against the Rams. Like, who knows? The Rams are fielding a preseason team at this point, and we'll see how things go in that regard. Christian Kirk is my number 15. Now, Zay Jones had the monster game last week and got all the attention, and rightfully so. But if you look at the targets the last 5 games, Christian Kirk has had 9, 12, 9, 7, and 10. He's had two games over 20 fantasy points, 1 game at 17.1, and then 2 games in the single digits. He gets Detroit this week. Detroit is an amplifier. They amplify fantasy points absolutely everywhere. So getting shares of or having exposure to Christian Kirk in your lineups, where I know that he let you down last week, is certainly a situation that I want to be a part of. I think I'm higher than on Christian Kirk, or have been higher on Christian Kirk since draft season. I believe I'm a little lower on Christian Kirk versus the field of rankers this week, but not by a whole lot. I think that he is in a really good floor situation and has touchdown upside in this spot. I would still start DK Metcalf above him because of bigger size, better end zone targets, all those sorts of things. At 16, Terry McLaurin. McLaurin has seen a really good resurgence, as the Commanders have done a fantastic job since making the quarterback switch. They play the Giants this week, who have done a good job against opposing wide receivers. The downfield ability has been unlocked for Terry McLaurin, and they're going to have to get him involved if they want to win this game. They are favored on the road against the Giants, which is a good sign. We'll see if McLaurin gets off this week. Garrett Wilson had a ridiculous game last week. Mike White threw like 95% of the balls that he threw were catchable balls. That is a big change from everything that we had seen with Wilson before at quarterback. We needed him to see more targets. He saw that the last few games. 8 targets against Chicago, following up a week 11 game against New England where he got 3 targets, 9 against Buffalo, 7 against New England. Give this kid service because he is very, very good. 3 of those 4 games, 92 receiving yards, 95 receiving yards, 115 receiving yards. Cashed in with 2 touchdowns last week with Mike White against Chicago. Chicago, a terrible defense. Minnesota, not a terrible defense, right? They're not, but they haven't been great, specifically defensive versus position against wide receivers. They project to be playing from behind in this one, do the Jets a little bit. They should have to keep pace with them, which means another high floor of target game for Garrett Wilson. Tyler Lockett comes in at number 18, right behind him. You're buying into the offense. You're buying into the spot here. If Jalen Ramsey is suited up for this game, I think that the Rams are going to start shutting down a lot of their players as the weeks kind of go on. Jalen Ramsey not going to get shut down immediately. Aaron Donald reputed to be possibly shut down. We know that Kupp is out with injury. We know that all of the offense is out, which could lead to a lot of short fields and heightened touchdown expectation for Tyler Lockett. Brandon Ayuk has been my number 1 target on the outside for San Francisco for, I don't know, the last like 4 or 5 weeks. Deebo Samuel was the guy last year, mostly because he was everything that they had on offense. But Brandon Ayuk has done a tremendous job, not just at leading this team in terms of targets the last, like, I don't know, since week 6, where he had 11 targets in back-to-back games. He had 80 receiving yards in 4 straight games over that stretch. That ended in week 11, but he had 2 touchdowns that week against Arizona, caught 5 of 8 balls last week against New Orleans for 65 yards in a very slow, sloggy, bully ball sort of game that the 49ers are always willing to get into with their defense and running game. A lot of weapons on this team now, and Brandon Ayuk kind of gets forgotten a little bit. And you shouldn't forget about him because he's a tremendous wide receiver with great big playability. I have him just ahead of Deebo Samuel, who I have at number 20. It's hard to differentiate. It really is, but I personally have Ayuk a notch ahead, just a notch. If you have both and you stack that team, fine, congratulations. You have a very good offense right now, but understanding that it's going to be difficult to pick which one of these two is going to end up scoring a touchdown. Deebo has seen a lot more targets than carries, at least on a ratio this year versus last, which is a very, very good thing, right? We want targets for Deebo Samuel. You don't want rush attempts for Deebo Samuel. We talked about how that rushing, long touchdowns for rushing was going to regress this year. And I got a lot of blowback on that in the preseason. What are you talking about? He's a ridiculous athlete. He's gonna score a ton of touchdowns this year. He has 4. and has, 2 of them on the ground. Scored a 39-yarder against Arizona on the ground. Those are just really hard to replicate. 7 targets, 9 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, but only 1 game over the last 4 in double digits, because there's just so many weapons right now on San Francisco. He'll have the one-off game, but he has not really done good enough on his draft price, averaging only 14.1 fantasy points per game. Mike Evans all the way down at 21 for me. I already mentioned the matchup. Not one that I like to attack. If I have Mike Evans, he's probably a flex play for me, a low-end wide receiver too. If I have other guys that I know are going to get paths to better volume or more efficient volume, I'm playing them over them. As you can see, typically Mike Evans is around wide receiver 9 through wide receiver 13, way down on the list for me this week. If you have 3 better wide receivers, I would not mind you playing them ahead of him, but it's very hard to think that you do. So if you're starting him and like holding your breath, hoping that he just sneaks his way into the end zone, as he has a couple of times against Lattimore. If Lattimore's back, if Lattimore's out, all bets are off. Evans moves way further up my ranking. Michael Pittman Jr. at 22. The offense is terrible for the Colts. Like, we know that, but like, they're going to be playing from behind. The defense, very good that they're playing against. But since Matt Ryan has moved back into the starting job, 11 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets. Way better than the Ellinger weeks and way more efficiency, even though Matt Ryan has been nowhere near efficient this year. And Michael Pittman Jr. has only scored 2 touchdowns this year. The volume in PPR is certainly carrying him, a floor of like 12.3 since Jeff Saturday took over the job. Juju Smith-Schuster, hard to pick out a wide receiver. Obviously, Travis Kelce, a tight end, not a wide receiver. On Kansas City, they are in that great game, that great matchup this week. Before he had that concussion, you could basically pencil him in for 8 targets. That's what I'm doing in this spot. And at number 24, Devontae Smith, who in the last 2 games has seen about 30+% of the target market share in Philadelphia since the Goddard injury. Smith has done a fantastic job, averaging 12.4 fantasy points per game on the season. But the last 3 weeks, had 9 last week against Green Bay, but on 9 targets, right? You want that 8, 9, 10 target. The last 3 games, 9 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets. That just is who he is in this offense right now. 9 points, 13.8 fantasy points, 14.9 fantasy points. A great way to end off our video here as our lowest end wide receiver 2. Hopefully you have him on your team with a great matchup against Tennessee this week. Thank you all for watching. Drop a like on the video. Look out for another video right there.
He's a legend.